I was just sitting at work and all of a sudden just like felt super lightheaded. And then I checked my heart rate because I felt like it was going really fast and it was like 190 just sitting down at my desk. I couldn't drive for more than like 10 minutes because I was so afraid that I would feel like I was going to pass out. I missed so much work sometimes that I went home a bunch of times and my focus was literally just getting through the day at work and coming home. And that was pretty much where I was at. I wasn't hanging out with my friends. I wasn't really doing anything working out wise besides a small walk, and which was totally different than what I was doing before. My life is back to what I was doing before all of this happened. I can run, I can work out, I can drive. I can run now for like 35, 40 minutes and then still do like a core workout after, which is basically what I was doing before the program, like before my symptoms even started. The biggest thing that I think I did was I stopped tracking my symptoms pretty much altogether. I didn't check my blood pressure, I didn't check my heart rate. I just kind of let it happen and I wasn't so hyper focused on that. And I just told myself it's just your nervous system. It doesn't matter what your heart rate is right now.
How's it going, Thrivers? Miguel here from CFS Recovery. In this video, we have Morgan, who had quite the turnaround on her journey. And this is an interesting case because it's one of those cases where we were able to catch things before things really went downhill. Things were going downhill, but we caught it pretty early on. So she was dealing with this for about 3.5 months before she found us. She got started and really turned her situation around. At your worst, Morgan, you had heart palpitations, some pretty intense POTS. Like you'd have 180 beats per minute, even when you were sitting down, among some other symptoms. But now, about 6 or 7 months later, you're running, you're working out, you're working full time and just living your best life. So I said a lot there, but Morgan, do you want to quickly introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, my name's Morgan. I'm 27 and I'm from Buffalo, New York.
Yeah. And actually, it's really interesting because you found us through someone who actually works at CFS Recovery, who used to be a thriver in the program. Shout out to Preston.
Yes.
Told me about your situation. He said, this sounds exactly like CFS. So let's connect and see what happens. And here we are 6 months later. So I know even just last year, around this time, you didn't even fall into this stuff yet, right?
Mhm.
How did this all start? Because it was all less than a year ago when you got triggered into this. How did it start? And when was that?
So right after Thanksgiving, so like beginning of December, I had COVID, and then it was pretty minor, nothing crazy. And then a few weeks after that, I got like the COVID booster at work, and same thing, nothing really came about it. And then a few weeks after that is kind of when I was just sitting at work, and all of a sudden just like felt super lightheaded. And then I checked my heart rate because I felt like it was going really fast, and it was like 190 just sitting down at my desk. So I knew like that was kind of the first thing that happened. And then that kind of just kept happening like on and off. Some days, mostly at work though, when I was just sitting. And then that was kind of manageable. I didn't really know what it was, but then it was a few weeks after that that I kind of just woke up and it was just like was not manageable anymore. It was just like dizziness, I was nauseous, my blood pressure was dropping. I just couldn't do like anything that I was doing before. So, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And so we're in pretty much in October right now, but last December, that's when you had that first incident with the heart rate shooting up.
Mhm.
What was that like? Because for a lot of people, they'd be terrified that it's a panic attack or a heart attack. Or how did you know it was that high? Did you go and measure it?
So I just had my Apple Watch on and I felt like my heart rate was super high. So I just was like, oh, I'll just take a look at it. And it was really high. So I kind of like talked to a couple of my coworkers and they were like, yeah, that's weird. But it kind of went away pretty fast. And then the next time it happened, I called my doctor and they basically said to go to the ER. And when I went to the ER, it happened again in the waiting room. So I obviously was allowed back and they just kind of couldn't find anything. And they were like, it could just be anxiety. Like I would just rest. And that was kind of that. So I kind of just went home without answers and wasn't too concerned about it because they did all the tests. But then it just kept happening. And it just kept progressively getting worse once I started waking up feeling dizzy and just struggling to do pretty much anything that I tried to do. So,
Hmm. And leading up to this what was life like? Like, were you exercising, working a lot, or, pretty much describe that? Because some people, they're really stressed building up to this. Other people kind of hits them out of the blue. But what was it like for you?
So I was working full time as a physical therapist, so a lot of standing, walking, lifting patients. So it was a pretty physical job. And then I also was working out pretty regularly, like 30 minutes, sometimes longer a day. Just like running was a big thing I liked to do, just like strength workouts. And I was hanging out with my friends all the time. I was pretty busy. I like to stay busy, and I just had no problems at all doing really anything that I was doing. So yeah, life
Mm-hmm.
was pretty normal before that started.
Yeah. So this thing kind of came out of nowhere. And what was it like when your heart rate kept going up? Was there fear or panic or anything like that? Or was it just more so confusion on what's going on?
It was more so confusion at first, but then the fear did start. I kind of was starting to just happen more frequently, and I was really unable to like ignore it at that point. So, um, but the fear really started once I started waking up, just completely unable to, like, I just felt dizzy. I felt off balance the whole day. I was leaving work early because I just thought, like, maybe I'm coming down with something, like, maybe this is something else. So, yeah, I definitely was more stressed out and scared of the symptoms, like, as it progressively got worse.
What kind of tests did they run? I'm guessing they ran some heart, EKG, all that stuff. Did they do heart scans? And you said they didn't find anything, right?
Yeah, I did. So the day that I went to the ER, they did pretty much every test. They did blood work, they did an EKG, everything. They found nothing. And then I went to the cardiologist and wore like a Holter monitor for 30 days. Still no answers. They said, yeah, your heart rate's fast, but like you're fine. There's nothing wrong with your rhythm or anything. And then the last test I did was the tilt table test, and I passed out on that. And they still kind of said, well, like it happens. People get POTS, and they just learn to live with it. Essentially, is what my doctor told me. So
Wow.
really
That is,
no answers, but it just gradually was getting worse. So
yeah, that's crazy. They just said you have to live with it. So outside the doctors, what other things did you try? Because you were a physiotherapist, so you understood the human body. Clearly, you knew something was wrong, but um, what was the next step after that? Did you start looking into specialists or alternative treatments?
yeah, so the steps I took after that, I kind of started to believe, like, maybe this is just, maybe I'm overthinking this, like maybe the symptoms aren't really there. I kind of started to wonder if it was as bad as I thought it was. So I started seeing a therapist, and she kind of was saying the same things the doctor was saying, like, yeah, like just try to rest and, stuff like that. And then I also saw a dietitian a couple times because I thought, maybe it's what I'm eating. Like, I do realize I get tired after I eat certain things, or, I'm not really able to eat as much anymore because I'm always nauseous. Like, maybe I'm like, I have an allergy or something. So I was literally trying. I also was told by my doctor to increase my salt intake because that would increase my blood pressure. So I was trying to do that in like a healthy way. So that's kind of the main reason I went to the dietitian. And then really right after that is when I found that Preston told me about this program.
Yeah. And what was going through your mind when nothing was showing up on the tests? Like, were you starting to get worried, or was it more so just like even more confusion that they weren't finding anything?
I kind of trusted that nothing was like severely wrong with me, but I was just getting really frustrated because I felt like I was doing everything the doctor was suggesting. I was wearing compression socks to work. I was sitting down at work as much as I could. I was staying really hydrated. I was doing pretty much everything he was telling me to do, and it just nothing was working. So it was more frustration and confusion, I guess, more than anything.
Hmm. And at that point, 2 to 3 months in, even when you found us, you were still working, right? Despite the symptoms, but were you working out as well?
I was still working, but I was not working out. I pretty much, my workout was just like walking my dog. But even that, I would only go on like a 10-minute walk after work. But pretty much at this point, I was just focused on, like, I missed so much work sometimes that I was like, I went home a bunch of times, and it was just my focus was literally just getting through the day at work and coming home. And that was pretty much where I was at. I wasn't hanging out with my friends. I wasn't really doing anything working out wise besides a small walk, and which was totally different than what I was doing before. So
So it was really just surviving pretty much. It was
yeah.
work, go home, take it easy, maybe walk the dog, but nothing really strenuous, right?
Yeah, nothing. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't running. I wasn't doing anything besides just working and walking.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember Preston, he was mentioning you to our team for a few weeks. And then I remember he mentioned one thing, that you were really looking for a fix for CFS or whatever you had. And they were going to do this test, which was super expensive. Was it in another state or something? And
Yeah.
he was like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the state now. It might have been Michigan. It was Michigan. And it was going to be like $12,000. And it was crazy that I actually was like, I could, we can make that work. Like, I was literally so desperate that I was like, maybe we could do that. And then my dad was the one that was like, no, you're not spending $12,000 on something that you don't know what it is. And that's kind of when I was like, yeah, you're right. And I just kind of felt, at that point, I just felt like there was no hope. I felt like this was just going to have to be my life. My doctor essentially said, like, yeah, you're not going to run anymore, not long distances. You're not going to be able to work out like you used to. He basically just said, like, I remember at one point he just said, this happens to people, and you're just in the age bracket that this happens, is basically what the answer was. So
That's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. And
That's
he said if
crazy.
it kept getting worse, we could talk about getting like a pacemaker, because that would at least help my heart rate, which obviously I didn't want a pacemaker. So it was very stressful, and just no answers were being given. So
Yeah, that is wild. So they really didn't have any solutions other than to cope with it, right?
they did say, one day, like, this happens to a lot of people. It is what it is, essentially. So
That's unfortunate. Well, luckily or fortunately, you knew Preston, who was working with us at the time. And then I remember we set up a call, we had that conversation, and then immediately we got you on a plan working with Krista. So tell us about your first month when things really started to turn around. Because at this point, you're not working out, you're not getting better. There's no clear answers on what's going on, and you're really just kind of spinning your wheels, trying to figure out what this even is, right? So, what was the biggest shift in that first month uh, working with the coaches?
the first, I think, honestly, once I kind of started the program, it gave me like the hope back. And I was like, okay, this isn't my life. Like, he basically promised me if I do the work, I'm going to get better. And the first month, I saw so many changes
Mhm.
practically immediately. Within the first couple weeks, I really started to notice, like, just how I was reacting was different, and I wasn't as stressed out. I was given tips to just, like, when my heart rate did go up at work, how to properly react and what kind of behaviors need to change in order to get better, essentially. So yeah, I was able to work. I was able to, I mean, it wasn't perfect within the first month, but I was working better. It wasn't as much of a struggle to get through my work day. I was starting to walk longer distances. I was like introducing just like low level exercise back, but that was more than I was able to do for the past 3 months before that. So that was huge, just being able to go on longer walks, being able to see my friends a little bit more. So yeah,
Mhm.
there was a lot of
Yeah.
changes in the first month for sure.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things that helps a lot of people is even understanding what's going on in the first place, like understanding it's a hypersensitive nervous system, and the fact that a lot of this is coming from your brain, how it's sending signals to your body. So, were you at all surprised at the cause of these things? Because it's such a physical thing you're feeling, but sometimes when people find out, wow, my brain is actually causing this, it kind of throws them off. So, what was that like for you?
Yeah, for me, it was like I kind of understood. It made a lot more sense once I knew it was my nervous system, just being hypersensitive, because all of my symptoms were nervous system related, like blood pressure, heart rate, temperature regulation, like all of my problems were basically my nervous system. So it definitely made sense. It was still shocking though. I was like, oh, all this time it was just my nervous system. It wasn't like a deeper issue of like my heart or a food I was eating or anything like that. So I think just like understanding that it was my nervous system kind of just like calmed me down, and like kind of made me stop Googling symptoms and stop trying to find answers that weren't there, because my life was pretty much just consumed with, before this program, just for trying to fix this. Like I was seeing anyone, I was talking to anyone, I was literally willing to go spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to go get this solved. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's a wild journey. Um, and something that helps a lot of people too is having some kind of plan in place. And I know you're working very closely with Krista in terms of increasing the activity in a way that it didn't, set you back or flare you up too much. So, um, what was that like, being able to message somebody about a plan and get specific feedback on your situation and what to do next?
Yeah, it was really helpful to learn from like coaches like Krista, who this happened to her as well. So she kind of understood what I was going through. And especially just because it wasn't just someone telling me it's going to get better, you're fine. It was someone that like she went through this and she personally had the same kind of struggles that I was having. So to be able to message someone that actually understood what I was going through just made me feel like so much less alone in this whole process, because at this point I was pretty much just like trying to have someone understand how I was feeling. So just to have someone like one little message away from like a question I had or a concern, or even if I just needed like reassurance, Krista was always there, and it was really helpful. So yeah.
Yeah. And for you, with all the progress you made, what would you say are the most helpful things that you did for your recovery? And there's so many things, because there's a lot of stuff we do physically, mentally, brain training. But for you, what were the top 2 or 3 things that really helped you? It could be, repeating a certain line in your head or telling yourself it's a nervous system. Um, what were those things for you, would you say?
The biggest thing that I think I did was I stopped tracking my symptoms pretty much altogether. I didn't check my blood pressure. I didn't check my heart rate. I just kind of let it happen, and I wasn't so hyper focused on that. And I just told myself it's just your nervous system. It doesn't matter what your heart rate is right now. And so that was really helpful. And then another thing was just like relying on your coach and messaging them when you had questions and not being afraid to ask questions, because I asked Krista so many questions that I thought were dumb, and she always gave me an answer that was actually really, really helpful. And she's like, that was a great question. So it was a lot of just like relying on the coaches and really trust the process, because it does work and it helped me like so much. So those were like the biggest things I think I did, was just like stop fixating on like every symptom and understand why they're happening, and then also just relying on the coaches.
I see. And in terms of mistakes you made on the way, the mistakes are probably the opposite of what you just said, help you the most.
Yep.
But if you could go back and expedite your recovery, knowing what you know now, what are some tips or advice you would give yourself back in like January, February, um, other than stopping tracking?
Yeah. A big mistake I made was just being afraid of the symptoms and just like trying to avoid them, when in reality you kind of needed to trigger them in order to recover. So just like limiting myself in activity, and just being afraid of doing activity just because I was afraid that my heart rate would go up, type thing. And then the
Mhm.
other thing would be like probably just not fully like I trusted that it would work, but I did have that initial doubt in the beginning, but obviously that went away pretty quick once I started seeing that I was getting better. But just like not to doubt the process at all, and just to fully trust that a lot of people got better from this program, so it's not going to be different for you.
Mhm.
You have the exact same thing going on. So
Yeah. And some people are going to hear this and be like, whoa, what do you mean you have to trigger symptoms to get better? This is crazy talk. So maybe walk us through that. For you, what did that look like on your journey? Because we teach people about adjustment periods, progress cycles, these kind of things. But how would you break that down to somebody who hasn't heard about it for the first time?
yeah. So, like, essentially, my nervous system was hypersensitive. So, whenever my brain wanted me to stop doing what I was doing, it would give me symptoms that my brain knew and learned that I couldn't handle. So, for me, those symptoms were all like the POT symptoms. So, lightheadedness, heart rate, those were my two, dizziness. Those were like my biggest symptoms that were holding me from everything. And my brain learned that it was holding me from that. So, my brain was trying to make me stay where I was by giving me the symptoms that it knew I couldn't handle, until eventually I started telling my brain that I can handle those symptoms and that I don't have to stop what I'm doing. So even though I felt those symptoms, I still like expanded my activity. I still, would run. Like, at first I was running like for 30 seconds. I would run for 30 seconds really slow, just taking my time and like showing my nervous system that it's okay that I'm dizzy and it's okay that my heart rate is going up. And then I would kind of just like gradually progress from there. And then eventually the dizziness was not there anymore and the heart palpitations weren't happening. And it just like shows that my brain learned that those symptoms don't affect me and they're going to stop giving it to you, essentially.
Hmm. Yeah, essentially you conquer the kryptonite symptoms, and once your brain realizes that, oh, these symptoms aren't going to hold this individual back anymore, it usually tapers down those symptoms, and it may try other symptoms like curveballs, but then you respond the same way. You say, oh, it's just the nervous system. And as you expand, even if you get comfortable at a certain level, like once you can run 5 minutes, barely any symptoms, once you expand to like 7 minutes or 10, you may get the symptoms again, but that's when you respond well, right? It's like a cycle, but it's like a positive cycle, not a downward spiral where you panic
Right.
every time you have the symptoms. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it
So
kind of got
yeah.
to a point where I was excited when I would get the symptoms, because that means when I was reacting well to that, it was going to be even harder to get symptoms again. I'd have to do like a higher level amount of activity in order to trigger those symptoms again. So turned into like you kind of wanted the symptoms because that meant that you were actually getting better. So, which was
Yeah.
hard to grasp at first, but once you grasped that, it was like you started seeing the progress. So,
Yeah. And that's the ultimate place to be in recovery, is when you're not afraid of the symptoms, you actually start to seek them out, and they do not scare you. You actually have some kind of positive association with them, because essentially you go from prey to predator. At first, it feels like you're being hunted by these symptoms. You feel the symptoms and you're like, oh crap, run away, retreat. We need to get to our safe zone. And that flips to you saying, all right, symptoms, where are you at? Let's do it. And you start going after them, and they just kind of run away, and they disappear because uh, you're in that offense mode versus playing full defense all the time. But it's a balance of both, right? So for you, I mean, for the last 6 months, you've just been crushing it. It's been up and up. Um, maybe not perfectly straight up recovery. It's like kind of like a squiggly line, but the trend is going upwards. So what are some things that you can do now that you couldn't do at the beginning of the year? It's October. Well, it's about to be October right now, and you're in the trenches in January and February.
yes.
So maybe let's start cognitively and mentally. What are some things you could do now that you couldn't do before?
So, my symptoms, the cognitive wise, I guess it was more just like the fatigue that was preventing me from doing the cognitive things. So, like, I would want to read or, call a friend or something, but then all of a sudden I would like start with those symptoms or the fatigue, and that's kind of what was preventing me from doing those type of tasks.
Mhm.
But like mentally, it was that whole mindset of like, oh, I need to stop what I'm doing. My heart rate went up, and just constantly checking symptoms and constantly deciding what I could do based on what my symptoms were. So I pretty much just wasn't seeing anybody. I wasn't exercising. I was leaving work early. Um, so I think like mentally it was just a lot of fear and a lot of just like mind shifts that didn't happen yet that needed to happen in order to get better.
Yeah. And tell us about the physical aspect, because I think you probably had more symptoms physically than mentally, for your situation, right? So what does that look like when we compare you today and what you're doing to January and February?
Yeah. January and February, I was pretty much just literally going to work and coming home. So what I'm doing now is so much more than I thought I would ever be able to do again. I just thought like, well, if I could just get to a point where I can do a little bit, I'll be happy. And that's just not like, it went so much better than that. So my life is basically back to it is back to what I was doing before all of this happened. So I can run, I can work out, I can drive. That was a problem. I couldn't drive for more than like 10 minutes because I was so afraid that I would feel like I was going to pass out, and which has happened a couple of times when I was driving, and that's kind of where that started. So I can drive longer distances. I can like just spend more time with people. So pretty much all of my physical activity has returned back to its normal like
That's
baseline.
awesome.
So yeah.
That's awesome. And what do your workouts look like? And how far, how long are you running for?
So it kind of was like a slow journey. I first started just, 10 seconds, and then I would do 30 seconds intervals of just like running a few times on a walk essentially. And then I started increasing to like 2 minutes of running, 3 minutes of running, all the way until I could basically run a mile without stopping. So like 10 minutes. And then that's when I kind of started like being able to run outside again. And I just gradually kept working up. So I can run now for like 35, 40 minutes and then still do like a core workout after, which is basically what I was doing before the program, like before my symptoms even started. So,
Holy cow, running for 30 to 40 minutes at a time.
mhm.
That is wild. Like even me, that's a pretty far run. Like that's some
Yeah.
pretty intense cardio. And I think a good sign showing that your nervous system is back to normal and thriving is how fast does your heart rate come down after a workout, which is like heart rate variability.
Mhm.
So before just sitting down, your heart rate was 180, 190 sometimes. And now when you're running, like after your workouts, your heart rate can stabilize itself, right? And
Yeah.
it's not
So, yeah, I feel totally fine when I'm working out. I never feel like lightheaded or dizzy or anything like that. So, like, it's completely normal workout. So,
that's crazy. That is crazy. And when you started 6 months ago, you were on blood pressure medication, right?
yes, I had a blood pressure medication that increased my blood pressure. And then I kind of just stopped taking it. I just kind of, I mean, I obviously talked to my doctor, but they said, whenever you're ready to stop taking it essentially. So one day I just kind of didn't take it at work and I was fine. And then I kind of was like, oh, I don't need the blood pressure medication. I fixed it with other ways to fix it that you don't need medicine. So that was really cool when I could stop taking that. Haven't taken that in like I mean, that was pretty much the most recent thing I stopped. That was like 3 weeks ago that I stopped taking it, but
Mhm.
I did decrease the amount I was taking throughout the program. So I started taking like I don't even know how much I was taking, but I gradually decreased it the whole time, and then I eventually completely stopped like 3 or 4 weeks ago. So, yeah,
Wow.
with no
Congratulations.
symptoms.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Huge. And it's so cool to see that happen with people like when they start or in the past. A lot of people are on all these different medications, but they're feeling horrible and not getting better, actually getting worse with medications. Where fast forward, once they start building momentum, they're on no medication, but they're continuing to get better. So, like, it doesn't even make sense from the outside perspective, but just goes to show how powerful your brain is when
Mhm.
you rewire it. So, no, that's amazing. Anything exciting coming up that you're looking forward to with all this energy you have back now and this newfound freedom?
Yeah, I'm just enjoying running. I might try to run like further distances and just keep going from there because I really missed it. So to be able to run again was huge. I've just been spending a lot of time with my family and friends. I really, for those like 3 months before the program, when I had the symptoms, I really wasn't spending time with basically anyone besides who I live with. So it was pretty much just like secluding. And now I'm just kind of making up for lost time and just doing the things that I like to do and just being more grateful for them though and than what I was before. Like you don't realize before when you're healthy what you have to be grateful for until you can't do it. So it definitely showed me a lot of things that I am thankful for that I now don't take for granted when I do them. So that's really
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah, I was the same way. It's like you you realize that even the simple things you took for granted, like taking a hot shower or walking down the street, simple things like that, like you can't really do when you're in the trenches of this. You're like,
Mhm.
I wish I could just stand outside or feel the wind on my face and
Mhm.
not feel all of these symptoms, or go for like a 2 minute run. and feel the blood pumping through my veins, but actually feel good about it. Not like I'm in this fight or flight mode, So for people watching this right now, what are some words of inspiration you want to share with them? And there's some people who've had this longer than you, some people around the same time, but you've been in the trenches for a bit and then you came out. So you were in a place where you didn't think you could get better from this, and the doctors were telling you couldn't get better. So what's some words of inspiration you want to share with some people who might be in your shoes?
I think I would just say, like, I hope whoever is watching this, if you're considering doing this program, I really hope that you know that it will work for you too. If you're willing to put in the work to get better, you will get better, essentially. Like, it's not like, what if it doesn't work for me? It will work for you. And like, I just wish if I could go back in time, I wouldn't have doubted it at all. I would have just been like, okay. And luckily I had Preston to tell me that, but I hope I can be that to someone else. Like, I would do this a million times over if I knew that it was going to give me my life back like this. So I think it's definitely worth it, and it's a time commitment, but it's worth it. You're going to get your life back, and you'll be better than you were before you got this too. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's powerful. Have you ever talked to the doctors that you were seeing, or your family doctor who said you couldn't recover? Has he seen you recently?
I actually haven't gone back. I did message them on like the little portal, and basically asked if it's okay to stop taking my blood pressure medication. And it kind of just came with the warning. They said, yeah, but remember, like, if it's hot out, you're going to need it. And I kind of just I just didn't need it. I had it with me just in case I needed it, but I didn't need it. And it just shows like how powerful this program is that, like, it's just such a new, like, I don't want to call it a disease, but it's like a new, like, diagnosis that no one really knows about. And I think people are just trying to treat the symptoms versus the main cause of it. And that's really what this program does, is it retrains your brain to, like, function differently than even before. Like, I hadn't dealt with stress well my entire life, and this program taught me how to, like, it was all just my nervous system that whole time. Like, it always, even without the symptoms, that even though I didn't have the symptoms, I still dealt with stress the wrong way, which kind of got me into this situation. So yeah, it just is like a new diagnosis that no one knows too much about. So I mean, I want to tell them about it, like, recommend people to go to this program, but I don't know if they would really do that. But
Yeah. A lot of them will be like, "Oh, I guess you were fine this whole time. Then it just took a few different things." And it's hard to get the doctors on board, especially if they're more traditional, because a lot of them don't even know what CFS is in the first place. Never heard of it. Have no idea what's going on, and yeah, it's just really interesting. But I'm curious, what's the furthest you've run so far in the last 6 months?
the furthest I've done is 3 miles was the furthest. Yeah.
So that's about, because I'm up in Canada, we use kilometers. I'm just really curious.
Oh, so that's I think it's 5 kilometers.
Yeah,
right?
about 5 kilometers.
Yeah.
Holy cow. You've run 5 kilometers and your heart was okay. No crazy pots, things like that.
Nothing. I mean, I think too, like, just from my experience as a physical therapist, like, if you haven't done something in a long time, like, you're gonna feel different. So I feel like when I first started running, I was quote unquote dizzy, but it was a different dizzy. It was like, oh, okay, I just haven't run in 4 months, or 5 months. So obviously now I'm running and my body doesn't know what to do. But it wasn't like I'm gonna pass out or anything like that. And now when I run, I don't have those symptoms at all. So
that is awesome. That is super exciting. You could be running a marathon next year if you have your goals. I said I was going to run a marathon, but then I learned that the most I'll run is about 5 kilometers. After that, it's just basically torture for me. So I just go to the gym, enjoy myself. I'll do a run and some cardio after, but I don't know if I can do a marathon. I was gonna
maybe a half marathon one day, but not a full marathon. And I think I would just do the half marathon one time.
Yeah, exactly. Just to, like, hit that milestone. Then you 100,000% know my body is fixed. It's thriving. Ain't no going back. It's on my bucket list though. I got to do it at some point. But yeah, your story has been awesome. And the cool part is this is really just the start of a new chapter. You came off your medication 3 weeks ago. So it's cool just seeing how much further you're going to go. And the coaches are very proud of you. Chris is really proud of you. And you just crushed it for the last 6 months. So is there anything else you'd like to share with people watching this right now who were dealing or are dealing with severe POTS, or you pretty much shared everything you want to share?
I guess the main thing is that like it will get better. I really gave up hope for a while, so and I know if people are dealing with it much longer than I am, like it might even feel it probably feels even less hopeful, but you will get better. It will happen for you too. So
Absolutely. Recovery is possible. So keep it up. Keep on crushing it, Morgan. And for you guys watching this right now, I hope you're really inspired by this video. Again, Morgan, earlier this year, which was 8 months ago, 8 or 9 months ago, was struggling just to get through the day. She was still functional, but dealing with a lot of symptoms, heart rate just all over the place. And she was able to run 5 kilometers 9 months later, right? And she's truly thriving. After doctors said it wasn't possible to recover, or they said she has to deal with this for the rest of her life. So sounds so common with a lot of people who recover as well. The doctors don't think it's possible. They end up doing it. So just know recovery is absolutely possible. And whatever your biggest takeaway was from this video, comment down below. What resonated with you the most? Do you deal with POT symptoms as well? It's a very common symptom. And if you did want some extra help, you can always reach out and apply for the program to work directly with us. We can build you a plan, just like we did for Morgan. And we'd be happy to help you go from surviving to thriving. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. Always remember that you are a thriver and you are just one mind shift away from living a life with thriving health. So we'll see you guys in the next video. Morgan, thanks so much. Keep on crushing it.
thank you.